All right, Mason, and now let's talk a little bit about our recruiting winners and losers after the early signing day. Early signing day was December 20th through the 22nd. As many of you already know, your favorite teams were either signing or getting their heart broken by some big time
Mhm.
athletes, and we've got some of those winners and losers to go over here. Let's go ahead and get started. What team was the biggest loser to you on early signing day?
Look no further than those lousy stinking Gators down south in Florida. I mean, look, they've got some problems going on. There are a lot of holes that need to be plugged on this ship, and um, they're struggling right now. They've got the transfer portal attrition that's going on, as well as now losing a lot of key players in their class, and they lost. Let's see, from December 18th, they lost four key players in their class. Now they were able to hold on to two of their only two 5-stars in the class, DJ Lagway,
Yeah.
and as well as the defensive lineman McCray.
If they had not have held on to them, do you think Napier's getting fired? I think it was possible.
I just go back to look at the schedule next year, and nobody wants to go in and walk into that, right? So
I'll
you
throw
would
the
say,
schedule up on the screen for you guys, and
yeah,
we'll take a look at that real quick, or you can take a look at that. We won't go through it, but it is absolutely freaking brutal.
yeah, he'll get fired sometime in those last 5 games, right? That's my prediction. Um, and it's one of those things like if they did not get those two 5-stars, they would have a lot of extra NIL money to go throw at a transfer portal guy,
Yeah.
right? Or two or three. So it's when you lose players like this, and this is what we're going to start seeing, when you lose a player, transfer portal player or a recruit, that opens up a lot of NIL money, and we saw it with Georgia, which is a team that we're going to get into. They're finished with the number 1 overall class, but Georgia lost Dylan Raiola out of their class. He transfers to Nebraska, and in steps KJ Bolden. I don't think that had anything to do with anything but NIL, right?
Yep.
They couldn't afford him before. Well, you lose a $2 million player, $2 million quarterback, supposedly, and now it opens up for KJ Bolden. And the
Yep.
reports are, and I have, a strong reason to believe these reports, that KJ Bolden was offered more money at Auburn, but he ended up going with Georgia because of the development and the proven development. To me,
Yep.
that tells me that Georgia, that he always wanted to go to Georgia, but Georgia wasn't in the ballpark with what Florida State was offering, right? And they weren't able to get in the ballpark until Dylan Raiola transferred,
It's
or
funny
excuse
how
me,
those
decommitted.
dominoes are falling, and one team is kind of reciprocating the other. It's really kind of wild how all of this goes hand in hand these days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But getting back to Florida, they lost four key players, including a 5-star, two 4-stars, and a 3-star, on from 12-18 up until 12-20.
Mhm.
And at the 11th hour, they ended up flipping, and they went from the number 3 class to number 16 overall. That's a pretty bad day.
Well, and not to mention, I mean, there was multiple decommitments back in November as well.
Hmm.
So you're talking like, it's not uncommon. Look, when you recruit at a very high level, and especially top 10 type level, upper echelon of college football, no doubt, uh, you're gonna have more washout. It's gonna happen. There's gonna be more heartbreaking flips, and that's natural. It happens to Georgia, it happens to Bama, it happens to Ohio State, but not 6 players.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen with 6 players, man. There is culturally something wrong
Hmm.
with this program, and there has been for a long time. Billy Napier, not to get because we're going to talk about all kinds of hot seat stuff this offseason. If you're not subscribed to the First and Long College Football Show, I don't know what the hell you're doing. We talk college football on the show year round, and we want you to be there, and help us by liking the video. But Billy Napier is in a really tough situation because I feel like he's a ball coach that would have been successful 10 years ago in college football at a big program like this, but it doesn't seem like he's adapting quick enough. And not to mention, I'm not sure how much help he's getting from the Florida Gators collective.
Right.
I, I
I don't feel like Billy Napier is a good fit for Florida. I
yeah.
I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't think he's a good fit for Florida culturally. I think that he stepped into a very sour culture, first of all, at Florida, and he wanted to come in and be hard nosed and strict and change things up in a lot of ways. And that's just not Florida. I feel like Florida is used to the Urban Meyer, is used to the old ball coach, sort of tenacity and fire and flame and pizzazz and that's I mean even Dan Mullen in some ways, he kind of fed into that and I just don't think it's the right place for a good old boy to be and that's just how I see it, and a lot of times coaching success is based on fit, right? And based on fit in how you respond, like you mentioned, to the collective, to the board, or to the boosters, and he doesn't fit. I don't think.
Well,
But
last recruiting cycle, we saw a quarterback that was supposed to be going to Florida apparently promised on a drunk booster night at some kind of booster event, promised a quarterback 12, $13 million. And when it came time to cut the nut, the money wasn't there.
yeah,
And so now I'm starting to wonder if, some of these guys are figuring that out now before they get signed up with Florida. But as you said, they got their two most important players that were in the recruiting class. I think that possibly saves Billy Napier. But as we said before, this schedule is absolutely brutal. Going to have a hard time next year. Yeah, I'm hard pressed to find 4 or 5 wins on that schedule, man. If they
yeah.
can go bowling next year, then they made progress, right?
But that ain't gonna cut it
Not for
in
Florida fans,
Gainesville.
it's not.
No.
And if you're a Florida fan watching this video, please drop us a comment. I want to know what your thoughts are on Billy Napier because, look, I'm disclaimer, I'm a Georgia fan, but I'm a college football fan first and foremost. And college football is better when the Florida Gators are better. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm just being realistic. We get better games. They're in marquee matchups every year. College football nation needs Florida to get their shit together. But it doesn't look like they're doing so at this point. Let's move on. We can talk about the Florida Gators all off season, and we probably will anyway. So
Yep.
stay tuned. Winners. Let's do a winner. We'll do a loser and then a winner. I don't want to be too negative here.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Let's do all the losers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's end on a high note.
yeah, let's do it. Everybody wants to hear about the losers, dude. Nobody wants to hear about the winners. Everybody talks about the winners. Let's talk about the losers. USC, man.
Yeah.
They're falling apart, brother.
Yep.
They're absolutely falling apart, and it's not just recruiting; it's current players. It's the product that they're having to bring in from the transfer portal. I mean, I don't know. USC has lost its luster a long time ago. This isn't something that's brand new. I mean, USC has been struggling for a while, but when those USC fans and the administration at USC put Lincoln Riley in charge, this is not what they paid for, was it?
Right. Absolutely. And that's been kind of my point in all this is um, this isn't what you brought him in for, and he was a pretty good recruiter at Oklahoma, a brand that recruits itself in a lot of ways, but never really struggled, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And you go into this class, there's not a single, first of all, there are no 5 stars. Secondly, there's not a single quarterback in this class, right? No big name receivers in this class. So, I mean, I guess you get Xavier Jordan, number 89 overall player, pretty good get at receiver. Tight end, 6'7", 245, Walter Matthews out of Georgia. Again, not a top 200 player, good size, probably a good blocker, but there's not a whole lot on offense. They do get a interior offensive lineman at 6'3", 285, number 42 overall in the country. And that was their best player,
Well, and
and
let me ask you something too. They get Will Howard in the transfer portal,
right.
right? Is that somebody that excites you? Does that strike you as a USC quarterback that plays for a Lincoln Riley coach team? Because
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. Look, I like Will Howard,
Mhm.
and he's got a ton of experience, but it's just not the flash in the pan that you're used to with a Lincoln Riley offense. It just seems like something's fishy. Something's missing there.
So I like this other side of this too is, you know, we've seen what Will Howard can do at Kansas State. This will be a real test for Lincoln Riley, right? Because this will be
Oh,
his season without a Heisman contending quarterback. The first
yeah.
time we've seen it. So can he get lemonade out of this lemon or not? Um, and he's got to go to the Big Ten. It's gonna be really tough. But I think that Lincoln Riley's really on a slippery slope. And we'll talk more about hot seat stuff later on in the off season. But as for signing day, this did not cut it. This was not what the USC fans, who are pretty honorary fan base, this is not what they expected. This is not what they want to see. And we'll have I'm sure everybody will have Lincoln Riley on a hot seat here in a couple months.
If and that's if he makes it to hot seat season. I
Hmm.
mean, we're still watching NFL teams, if you're into that type of thing, uh, playing regular season games, right?
Hmm.
And the consensus has been that if he left somewhere, it wouldn't be to another college; it would be to the NFL.
Right.
So, excuse me, we'll see about that. We don't cover the NFL here, but uh, I think he's a good offensive mind, and I think he would work out well in the NFL. I know a lot of USC fans are excited to see like Deuce Robinson. I mean, there's still some players
Mhm.
obviously on this offense. I mean, it's going to be a good offense next year,
Zachariah Branch. I
but
mean, they've got weapons.
and they went and hired a decent defensive coach, but as pretty much anybody that's watched Lincoln Riley teams over the last few years, you're skeptical. It doesn't
Well,
matter if they hired friggin' Bill Belichick to run the defense. You're
and
skeptical.
we didn't talk about the transfers that are coming out. I mean,
Oh,
they are bleeding.
flooding out.
Yeah.
And guys are sitting out like crazy. I saw Brendan Rice
Hmm.
is sitting out of their bowl game. Obviously, Caleb Williams is sitting out. He's getting ready for the NFL draft. Um, and that's just a couple guys. I mean, this is a long list. Things just seem to be falling apart.
Yeah.
Okay. And if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a freaking duck.
Yep.
Okay. And to me, it just seems like USC is kind of on a downward slide. And I can tell that you agree with me there. Um, Here's another one that we put on the losers list, and I think a lot of people would probably disagree with this. I know some people would, but seems like Ohio State kind of stubbed their toe right at the finish line here on signing day. Lost a couple of good players, Jeremiah McClellan and Jordan Lyle, wide receiver and running back, respectively. There, those are both 4-star guys, big pieces to the recruiting class, and uh, they fall down quite a few rungs in the
Yeah.
recruiting rankings. What and beyond that, it also seems like there's been a bit of an exit of talent through the transfer portal. You got Julian Fleming, you got old Honda McCord headed out to Syracuse. He's going to ride the Honda McCord all the way up to New York.
Hmm.
What's your thoughts and your read on the Ohio State football program right now? Because I feel like the cheese is just about to fall off the cracker for Ryan Day, and I say one more bad year. They lost one game this year, right? But they're one bad season away, I think, from the cheese completely falling off the cracker. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, the transfer portal stuff, I'm not concerned with at all. This is the same thing that we see with Georgia,
Yep.
and Alabama, and for an outsider, you know, because I know the Georgia program so well, and I know all the players that are coming out of the transfer portal. If an outsider were to look at that, they'd say, "Man, what's happening at Georgia?" And I think it's easy to kind of say that too about Ohio State if you don't know about the players there, and what kind of playing time that they're getting and what they're bringing in, behind those players. In particular, Fleming. I think that you look at the young talent that's coming in behind him, and he's got to have a better opportunity somewhere else. And I think that that's all it is, with the transfer portal. You mentioned the two that they lost in this recruiting cycle, and that definitely hurt them. But I think that leapt over, and that's why they dropped down to number 4 overall. But on a positive, I think that holding on to Jeremiah Smith, obviously, everybody was waiting with bated breath to see what this guy was going to do.
Yeah.
Right, number 1 player overall. Julio Jones comp. I mean, this guy
Yeah.
is unfreaking believable, the real deal. Very, very much hyped up. And people didn't know, I don't know if you saw the press conference with Ryan Day afterwards, but um, he was talking, in a press conference, I think for bowl practice or something like that. And one of the reporters was like, Jeremiah Smith, finally does completely commit, to the program. And he was like, he did, he's like, he like kind of collapsed and had a deep sigh of relief, and it was pretty good.
And then he fainted on the
Yeah,
field.
yeah, yeah, and then he got real serious, and he was like, somebody fact check that real quick before I say anything I shouldn't, because he's like, make sure he's signed, before we start, celebrating and all that. So that was a big win, I think, in um, I think a lot of people were afraid that the Florida commit might end up staying in Miami, and staying in the South Florida area. So that was a big deal and a big win for them. And also Edric Houston, he had a lot of late buzz to Alabama. He's a fringe 5-star defensive lineman, an edge player, and he ends up staying committed. Another one of those Buford dogs over there at Buford High School in Georgia that tends to produce talent year over year. And
That
so
the Georgia Bulldogs can't get anybody to go to school there from.
well, apparently KJ Bolden broke the curse, but we'll get to them in a minute. But yeah, I think that was a big win for Ohio State. Just holding on to those 2 players.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Ohio State's fine. I'm not worried about Ohio State. I set that question up kind of like I'm worried about Ohio State. This is
Mm-hmm.
when the cup runneth over with talent. You're exactly right, Mason. You nailed it. It was
Mm-hmm.
a trick question. I was testing you.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. It's the same thing that goes on in Alabama. Alabama had like 20 players transfer out last year, dude.
Yeah.
So don't you miss me with the whole that it doesn't matter how many players are going out, it matters what's coming in.
Yeah.
That's what matters. And as long as Ohio State continues to now top 10 recruiting is not great for Ohio State. Top
Mm-mm.
5 is what they're aiming for, and typically, the area, the ballpark in which they're in. And I know that's where they want to be. They want to be number 1.
Yeah.
But they're fine. They're going to be fine. And the transfer portal is not done. That is the one of the beautiful things about the transfer portal. Now you know who's signing. You got one more signing day in February in case you want to go after a spot, that you need to fill. And then you've got transfer players, even from the playoff teams. They're going to have an extra few days, to transfer out after the playoff games and national championship. So we still got a ways to go. And then you got the whole spring, to
Mm-hmm.
figure out holes and things like that. So I think Ohio State is doing just fine. And even though they're in our losers column here, let's talk about winners real quick, and we'll move on. UGA, yeah, you mentioned it. KJ Bolden, they finally get a Buford guy, man.
Yeah.
Georgia loses a commit from the Buford High School, and then a few days later they get a commit from another 5-star that goes to school there. That place is just talk about the cup runneth over. Buford High School has got some amazing football players that come in and out of there. UGA, obviously the number 1 class in the country. We're going to put the top 10 rankings up here at the end of the video for you to take a look at, and I'll kind of go through those here in a few minutes. But Georgia does secure their number 1 spot after losing the commitment from Dylan Raiola, who ended up going to Nebraska. We'll talk about Nebraska in a second. But what are your thoughts about UGA's class in 24? It's a pretty damn good one.
Pretty dang good, the number 1 cornerback in the country, number 1 linebacker in the country, number 1 safety in the country, several top 10 players at their position. And by the way, they got a really good quarterback as well, in Ryan Puglisi, who kind of gets overshadowed in this class. But I think that he's probably the diamond in the rough. And I think a lot of the national media and Georgia fans also mainly the Georgia fans are starting to look at Ryan Puglisi and say, wow, this guy stuck with his commitment, even when Dylan Raiola was committed, which Puglisi was committed before Raiola. Raiola comes in and he just stays steadfast, and he says, hey, I want to be a dog. And, he's continued to progress. He looks great and has kind of suffered from playing in Connecticut. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of been a reason why people aren't higher on him as a prospect. But and I'm not saying he's going to come in and be a starter even in year two. This is a little bit of a project type of quarterback, and but he's the type of guy that Georgia likes. He fits the culture. He's going to come in and work really hard. Super super smart player, right? As we say, and he really heads up player there. But yeah, and I think that I think that he's going to be a good cultural fit. But you mentioned it. KJ Bolden was kind of the biggest news of recruiting day, right? Of National Signing Day for the early period. Um, Everybody was wondering where he was going to go. I watched his signing live, and as soon as he came out in a black tux with a white undershirt and a Georgia Bulldog red bow tie, I kind of had an idea where he was going to go. It was pretty obvious, and there was a lot of buzz. Late in the night the day before, that of KJ to Georgia. But prior to that, I mean, Hugh Freeze even hinted at it, in one of his press conferences. He said, when a guy texts you and calls you the day before and says, I'm coming, I'm signing, I'm coming, coach, you feel pretty good about it. And to lose that guy, kind of hurts. And I mean, it's pretty obvious he was talking about KJ Bolden.
Yeah.
So I think this was a very last minute type of decision, and I think that from the accounts that I've heard, at least, say that he took the um experience that he's going to gain from Georgia, and he mentioned it himself that Georgia puts more DBs in the league than any other school. Um and he's going to take that proven track record over things like NIL, and you got to commend the young man. I think he was probably really salivating over a lot of money, that gets thrown his way. But at Georgia, there are NIL opportunities. Georgia's just less likely to give them to you until you earn them. And KJ Bolden's a guy who can certainly come in and contribute right away. I don't know if he'll be a starter, but he'll contribute right away, and he
Well,
can earn himself some really good money in Athens.
and that's one of the things that I was about to bring up. So Georgia's had some secondary players go in the transfer portal. Some highly sought after high school recruits that couldn't quite, you know, make it onto the starting, lineup there. Um, I think that in conjunction with Dylan Raiola not taking up the cap space that
Hmm.
he was, I think it kinda helped KJ Bolden make his decision. It's like, okay, the whole reason I think he was going to Miami was I can play right now, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a bag, obviously. He was getting a bag no matter where he went, but I can go play right away, and I think that was important to him, and I think we can all, share that same thought, like, I want my cake, and I want it now, and I wanna
Yeah.
eat it too,
Yeah.
right? I get it. He's 18 years old. Um, But whenever there was an outflux of talent at his position, in the secondary in general, at Georgia and the money being freed up, I think it was the perfect storm.
Yeah.
But I think KJ was going to be comfortable at Florida State, Auburn, or Georgia. I think any of those three, he felt like, okay, I can go to school here.
Yeah.
Now it's let's make a business decision about it. Um, Speaking of Miami, Miami had a big signing day, and so did Texas, and so did Nebraska. You got any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I think that Miami getting Justin Scott. I think that I want to say he was an Oklahoma commit. I may be wrong on that, but that he's their lone 5-star in the class, but number 7 overall player, defensive lineman, 6'4", 310 pounds, big dude, and they go up to Chicago and pull him out. So that was a big get for them. And then also holding on to Armando Blunt, who let's see, I think he was committed to Miami, and then about 2 weeks ago, he flips his commitment to Florida State. and then Miami gets an in-home or gets him back on campus, and I mean, follow the visits,
Yeah.
and he ends up back at Miami at the end of the day. Pretty big deal there. They also get a wide receiver, Nikar, who was a one-time Georgia commit, but he ends up signing with Miami at the end of the day, top 100 overall player. This is a really solid class for Miami, and another top 10 class for them, top 5 this year. Last year it was top 10. Um, they're doing what they're supposed to do,
Well, and what's crazy is, man, that the we've talked about it several times over the last couple of weeks. Florida teams were on the rise. I know the Florida Gators kind of fell off the wagon a little bit here at the finish line. But Jason Taylor, everybody knows Jason Taylor as the NFL Hall of Famer. He's a recruiter for Miami,
Hmm,
and he finished as the top ranked recruiter in the ACC this
yeah,
year. And he's out there beating the drum for Miami. Their goal was to sign the best defensive class in the country this cycle. And while it's up for debate whether or not the Hurricanes actually own the best crop of players or not,
yeah,
he did a damn good job. And Miami, I think Miami was missing a quarterback on offense last year and a couple of pieces to put around on that defense, but this was a damn good football team. I was talking to my dad at Christmas. Merry Christmas, by the way, everybody. Check out my full of holiday spirits for
hey,
real though.
these are my
Um,
holiday spirits here.
nice, cheers. Um, but me and my dad were talking about it, and Miami was not nearly as bad as their record indicated this past year. I mean, they just weren't.
Yeah,
I refuse. I will die on this hill. Miami was a decent little football team.
hmm,
They just they don't have a winning culture there, man. And they've got to figure out how to win, and you got to learn how to win. And that is a real thing. That sounds so cliche, but damn, it's a thing, man. Winning is a culture. And winning is earned. It's not deserved, and the you and all that shit doesn't mean anything. And I think Mario Cristobal's in the midst of trying to wipe that stuff out. And as he hands a win to Georgia Tech this past year, he didn't help their case any either. So part of the blame can be put on him for sure, but definitely getting an influx of talent in there. Texas was surprisingly, I mean, that they made quite a few jumps in the top 10 rankings in that last week there. What were your thoughts about Ryan Wingo, 5-star wide
yeah,
receiver from Missouri going to Texas, and then Xavier Filsame
yeah,
was a 5-star safety out of Texas. They ended up flipping him from Florida.
yeah.
So big day for the Texas Longhorns.
It
Man,
is.
they're piling up talent right now, man.
Well, if Florida's having issues paying their recruits, I think they can go to Texas and trust that they're going to get some of that oil money themselves. So maybe that's the reason why I feel same kind of jump ship there, and also he is a Texas guy, so makes a little bit more sense, But getting the 6'1" safety, 5-star guy from Florida back in his home state, I think that was a really big flip for them. And then also Ryan Wingo was a guy who is out of Missouri, out of St. Louis, and was really considering Missouri for a long time, and he was
Yeah.
supposed to be their second 5-star and their big guy, big cash cow, I guess. And he ends up, going to Texas. So Texas gets another really good wide receiver class, and I think that Texas is back. I think it's safe to say, they are doing what they need to do, and they're getting big and physical up front, on the offensive and defensive lines, doing what they need to do to enter the SEC, and they're recruiting like an SEC program. Um, there's an argument to be made that Texas is the hottest team in college football right now, I'll listen to that argument. I'm not shying away from it. I think that Texas is going to get a lot of publicity this offseason, a lot of talk, and they're going to be one of the favorites moving forward for a long time to come, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Another team quickly we'll touch on, because I'm not gonna sit here and pump this thing up like the Nebraska Cornhuskers are about to do something in 24. But Matt Rule is definitely working on the culture. and bringing in an influx of talent. There's zero doubt about that. And they're doing it through NIL. We know this because Dylan Raiola decommitted from Georgia, and we don't know all the particulars of the money, but the talks were $3 million they were giving this kid.
Mhm.
Now I don't know how much of that is true. Take it with a grain of salt. But regardless, I can't remember the last time Nebraska had a 5-star quarterback. Can you?
No, he's the highest rated quarterback or highest rated recruit that they've had. Um,
Ever, right?
well, in the modern era of recruiting,
I
I
mean, I
guess.
know they were really, really good in the '90s, and I get
Yeah.
that, and the Frazier era and all that. One of the some people would say, what was it? The '95 Huskers were maybe the best football team ever,
Hmm.
or something like that. And that's great and all, but that's a long damn time ago.
Yep.
Nebraska hasn't won a bowl game in like 10 years, or they haven't been to a bowl game in like 10 years. Excuse me. So they bring in a 5-star quarterback, Dylan Raiola from Buford, Georgia. They got a 4-star tight end here, a 4-star offensive tackle, 4-star athlete, um, and 4-star interior offensive lineman, and then they got a bunch of 3 stars and stuff. What's your thoughts about Nebraska? Are they on the rise, or what's up? I mean, really, the trajectory could only go up, right? I,
Yeah.
I mean, without looking at their schedule here, are they going to make steps forward next year?
Um,
Are
maybe
these guys
not.
going to help right now? Because I know that's what they want. They want to get better right now.
No.
Because if you don't do something with these guys within the next year or two, they're
Yeah.
going to be in the transfer portal, right?
It's gonna. I think 2025 is the year that you circle and say, hey, can we make a push for college football playoff? And then 2026 is like, hey, we got to get over that hump, you know. But Matt Rule, he's a tenacious, um, you know, coach in general. I mean, tenacious recruiter. You've seen his halftime speeches. He's fun to listen to. He's a type of coach that kind of pumps you up. And so I don't
Yeah.
think that he's going to have any issues bringing in good talent. I think that I think that he is a perfect coach for the transfer portal. A lot of these pro coaches kind of are, but that's where he's going to have to get his wins this offseason, I think, is in the transfer portal. They got to build this momentum up, right? You get Raiola in, you get Carter Nelson in. I think that those are kind of like your two big gets. A pretty good offensive tackle. You get 3 top 200 overall players. That's pretty good for Nebraska. And then about 25. It looks like, yeah, probably about 25. 3 stars. They just need strength in numbers right now. So they're going to
Yeah.
have to also do it in the transfer portal. Let's slowly kind of recomp, this entire program, recomposition it and kind of weed out some of the dead weight and bring in some new guys and just see what sticks. There are a lot of good gets out of 3-star players, and that's what they're going to have to do is find the diamonds in the rough and coach them up. One thing that's really surprising is um, geographically where Nebraska is recruiting out of. So I'm just going to kind of run through these real quick. Georgia, Nebraska, Iowa, Texas, Hawaii, Florida, Nebraska, Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Missouri, Montana. So like they are kind of going out there and trying to identify good talent and bringing them in. Even if they are 3-star guys, they're doing a good job of not just going into their backyard and seeing what they have. They're kind of spreading that out, and also locking up a Carter Nelson out of Nebraska is a pretty tall order. I think Georgia was in pretty high on him, and Georgia's tight end university. So, to be able to lock down your state and recruit nationally, I think that they're heading the right direction. But they're going to have to build on the momentum that they have from the 2023 season into the offseason and then next year. I don't expect Dylan Raiola to come in, and I'm sorry for all the Cornhusker fans who think that he's going to come in and light it up. I hope that nobody's putting that much pressure on him, but
Yeah.
I think he's going to struggle in the Big Ten as a true freshman quarterback. I think that he will be the starter, as far as I can tell. I think that that's kind of why he went to Nebraska on top of NIL. I think it's the sort of, you know, soft promise of early playing time and being the starter from day one. I think that had a lot to do with it. But I think he is going to struggle in year one. I think he will get better in year two, and by year three, he's going to be knocking on the door of being the number one overall player. And that's how you want to see it play out if you're a Nebraska fan. Otherwise, if you whiff on this guy, it could put your program in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and in a $3 million hole, or whatever, however many millions it was. Regardless, it was a lot of money,
Mhm.
for a guy that's never played a college football snap. We're gonna see how it goes, man. The Big Ten doesn't get any easier, and it doesn't get any easier because of the fact of the teams that you're adding. So, going to be very interesting to see what their schedule looks like going forward, and we're going to unpack all that.